My father laughed when he handed me the deed. Actually laughed. The kind of laugh you use when you're giving someone a gag gift at a white elephant party. My brother joined in. Even the attorney smiled. The deed said 14 acres and a condemned farmhouse in Hickman County, Tennessee. What none of them knew, what my father had never bothered to check in 15 years of owning it, was that 14 acres was just where the story started. My name is Jake Sullivan. I'm 28 years old. And this is the story of how my father divided everything he'd built between his two sons, gave my brother the construction company, the Brentwood house, and $500,000 in cash, and gave me what he called the dump, with a smirk on his face. How I drove out to that dump alone on a November morning and found something nobody in my family had looked for. And how, 14 months later, my father called me from a borrowed phone because his own had been shut off, asking me to save the son he'd always chosen over me. I need to start in October 2024, Nashville, Tennessee. My dad, Tom Sullivan, was 65, built his construction company from nothing, Sullivan & Sons Construction, profitable for 30 years. He was the kind of man who measured everything in dollar amounts and square footage. If it couldn't be appraised, it didn't count. My brother Garrett was 32, followed dad into construction straight out of high school, married well, his wife Rachel's family had money, lived in a $1.2 million house in Franklin, drove a new F350. He was everything my father had wanted in a son. I went a different direction. Environmental science degree from University of Tennessee. Worked for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Made $52,000 a year. Drove a 2016 Tacoma with 140,000 miles on it. Lived in a 2-bedroom rental in East Nashville. Dad had never said he was disappointed in me directly. He didn't need to. It was in the way he described my job at family dinners. Jake works for the state, he'd say, the same tone you'd use to explain why a dog couldn't come inside. The meeting was October 11th, 2024. Tom's estate attorney's office on West End Avenue. Leather chairs, framed degrees, the kind of office that costs $400 an hour. Dad sat at the head of the table, Garrett beside him, me across. "I'm not waiting until I die," Dad announced. "I'm dividing things now, while I can see how it plays out." The attorney slid folders across the table. Garrett's folder, Sullivan & Sons Construction, appraised at $4.2 million. The family home in Brentwood, $950,000. $500,000 cash. Total, $5.65 million. My folder had a single sheet. A property deed. Sullivan Farm, I read aloud. Hickman County, 14 acres. Your grandfather's old place, Dad said, 90 minutes west. Been sitting empty since he died. Roof's caved in the back. Foundations cracked. Condemned in 2018. Garrett was already smiling. "Dad, that place is basically a liability." "Exactly," Dad said. He looked at me. But Jake's always been the nature type. Figured he'd appreciate having land, something to walk around on. He paused. "Besides, he never came into the business. Garrett earned what he's getting. You get what's left." "This is a joke," I said. "No joke," Dad replied. "That's your inheritance." The attorney looked at his papers. I took the folder, stood up, drove home. I sat in my parking lot for 20 minutes, not crying, just sitting with it. Then I decided I'd at least go see the thing. November 2nd, 2024, a Saturday. I drove 90 minutes west on I-40, then south on county roads into Hickman County. GPS took me down a gravel road, then a dirt road, then a driveway so overgrown the branches scraped both sides of my Tacoma. The farmhouse was worse than I'd expected. Roof collapsed in the rear third, windows gone, front porch sagging 45 degrees. Whatever this place had been, it had stopped being it a long time ago. But I didn't go inside. I walked the land instead. That was when something felt wrong. Or not wrong. Off. The property kept going. Past the tree line. Past the creek. Up a ridge and down the other side. I'd been walking 40 minutes and I still hadn't found a fence line. I pulled out the deed on my phone, read the legal description carefully for the first time. 14 acres, plus or minus adjoining parcels as recorded, Deed Book 47, page 112, Hickman County Register of Deeds. Adjoining parcels, Monday morning, I drove back to Hickman County, walked into the Register of Deeds office on Highway 48 in Centerville, asked the clerk to pull everything recorded under Sullivan Farm. She came back 20 minutes later with a stack of folders. My grandfather had been buying land since 1963. Small parcels, neighbors selling off pieces, timber tracts, a creek bottom, a ridge line. One by one, over 4 decades, he'd assembled them all under the Sullivan Farm name. Never consolidated the deeds, just kept adding. The clerk spread the maps across her desk. "Sir," she said, "this property is 127 acres. I stared at the map. "Your grandfather bought the last parcel in 1997, she continued. "Each one's recorded separately, but they're all contiguous. It's one farm. 127 acres. My father had owned this property for 15 years after Grandpa died, had never once driven out to walk it, had seen a condemned farmhouse, and assumed that was the whole story. I drove home and called a land appraiser I'd worked with through the wildlife agency. His assessment came back 2 weeks later. Undeveloped land in Hickman County was running $8,500 to $11,000 per acre, depending on timber, water access, and road frontage. My 127 acres had a creek running 800 feet along the eastern boundary, hardwood forest covering 60 acres, and a ridgeline with long-range views to the south. His number, $1.24 million. Conservative estimate. I sat with that for a long time. Then I kept reading his report. Page 4, mineral rights. In Tennessee, mineral rights can be severed from surface rights when land is sold. My grandfather's original deeds, every single one, included a clause retaining all mineral rights with the surface. Nobody had ever sold them off. I contacted the Tennessee Geological Survey, described the location, asked about mineral activity in western Hickman County. The geologist called me back Thursday afternoon. "Limestone," he said. "Western Hickman has significant limestone deposits. There are 3 active quarry operations within 12 miles of your coordinates. Surface rights holders in that corridor have been approached for extraction leases." I hired a mineral rights appraiser. His number, $340,000 in limestone extraction rights. Not life-changing on its own, but it wasn't nothing. Then I walked the timber. 60 acres of hardwood forest, oak, walnut, black cherry. I knew enough from my work to recognize old growth when I saw it. These trees were 50 to 70 years old minimum. I hired a timber appraiser through a contact at the agency. She spent 4 hours on the property, came back with a sustainable selective harvest estimate, meaning take the mature timber, leave the forest intact, let it regenerate. Her number, $280,000. I added it up on a legal pad. Land, $1,240,000. Mineral rights, $340,000. Timber, $280,000. Total, $1,860,000. My father had laughed, handing me a deed to $1.86 million in assets because he'd never looked past the broken house at the end of the driveway. I told nobody, not a single person. I hired an attorney in Nashville, small firm, real estate specialist, secured a $40,000 line of credit against the property to cover legal and appraisal fees, got everything documented, verified, filed. Then I waited. I didn't wait long. January 2025. Garrett called me on a Tuesday night. "Sullivan & Sons is in trouble," he said. 3 projects went over budget. The housing market slowed down. We've got $800,000 in payroll and materials coming due, and the receivables aren't there. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Dad needs to liquidate something fast. He's been going through the estate records, and he thinks there might be some old parcels from Grandpa's property he never transferred. He was going to sell them for quick cash." Garrett paused. "But the county says it all went to you. All of it." "That's correct," I said. "The deed transferred everything recorded under Sullivan Farm." Silence. "Jake," Garrett said carefully, "how much land are we talking about?" 127 acres, I said. The silence lasted longer this time. Dad called 20 minutes later. "You knew," he said, not a question. "I found out in November," I confirmed. "Why didn't you say anything?" he demanded. "You gave it to me as a joke," I said. "Called it a dump. Said I was getting it because I didn't earn a real inheritance. You laughed, Dad, in the attorney's office. You actually laughed. I didn't know. You didn't check. I interrupted. You owned that property for 15 years and never once drove out to walk it. Never pulled the deed records. You assumed it was worthless because you saw a broken house and stopped looking. I need that land, he said. Garrett's company is going under. I'll buy it from you. Fair price, $500,000. It appraised at one point to $4 million for the surface alone, I said. That's before mineral rights and timber. Dead silence. It's worth nearly $2 million, I said. And it's not for sale. Jake. His voice changed, harder. I'm your father. I built everything from nothing. You gave me a punchline, I said. You made me sit in an attorney's office while you handed my brother $5.5 million and gave me what you called a dump. And now you want it back because you finally looked at what you were laughing at. The answer is no. He threatened to sue, said the transfer was a mistake, that he hadn't understood what he was conveying. My attorney's response letter was 4 paragraphs. The deed transfer was legal, witnessed, notarized, and recorded. Tom Sullivan had signed it voluntarily. There was no misrepresentation. There was no mistake, just a man who hadn't done his homework. Tom dropped the lawsuit threat within 2 weeks. Garrett's company filed for bankruptcy in March 2025. Tom had co-signed $600,000 in business loans to help Garrett. When the company went under, those came due. He had to sell the Brentwood house to cover them, moved into a 2-bedroom condo in Antioch. In April, I sold the selective timber harvest rights for $280,000. Let the crew work the mature hardwoods over 8 months. The forest stayed intact. In June, I signed a mineral rights lease with a limestone quarry company. $340,000, paid over 3 years. With the first payments, I paid off my student loans. $31,000. Built a small cabin on the ridge, off-grid, solar, 900 square feet, $94,000. Invested the remainder. I kept every acre, all 127 of them. Dad called me in July, different number. His cell had been shut off. I know I don't have any right to ask, he said. But Garrett's struggling, lost the house. Rachel took the kids to her mother's. He's got nothing. I listened. I made mistakes, Dad said. With both of you. But mostly with you. Yes, I said. You did. Can we start over? He asked. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Maybe, but not today. I still own the land. Drive out most weekends, sit on the cabin porch and watch the sun go down over the ridge my grandfather bought in 1974 for $4,200. His name was Robert Sullivan. He never talked much. Just kept buying land, one piece at a time, and recording the deeds carefully in Deed Book 47. I think he knew what he was leaving behind. I think he chose who he left it to. Here's what I know now. People who hand you the broken thing with a laugh are telling you exactly how little they think of you. That laugh is a measurement. My father measured me and came up with worthless. And so he gave me what he thought matched. What he never understood is that value isn't always visible from a driveway. Sometimes you have to get out of the car and walk the land. He never walked it. In 15 years, he never once walked it. I did. On a cold November morning with dead leaves under my boots and no idea what I was going to find. And what I found changed everything. Not because I got lucky, but because I looked. The people who dismiss you have usually already decided what you're worth. They stopped paying attention. They saw the broken house and drove away. Don't drive away. Walk the land. Check the deed records. Find out what's actually there. Because sometimes the thing they gave you laughing is the thing that outlasts everything they kept. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and tell me which country you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you. Subscribe so you never miss these stories about hidden worth, quiet vindication, and understanding that the inheritance nobody wanted sometimes turns out to be the only one that mattered. New story every single day. See you in the next one. Take care.